Well, hello and welcome to Alamance County Talks Politics. Just the other week, the Carolina Journal came out with an article that stated the North Carolina Senate passed a resolution on Monday that calls for an Article 5 convention of the states to impose term limits on members of Congress in Washington, D.C. In light of this, I have asked Sean Francis, who is the chapter leader of the John Birch Society, to come before us and explain to us what is actually taking place in North Carolina and this Article 5 convention. So welcome to the program, Sean, and if you would, take it away.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Keith. Yeah, this is a topic that many people will have heard me speak on. Last year, I did a couple of presentations to the Alamance County commissioners, asking them to make a resolution calling out Alamance County Republicans for the job they were doing and just deceiving the public. What they're doing here is they're pretending to pass. They're pretending that they can limit the agenda of an Article 5 convention. When in truth, most of the Alamance County voters don't even know what an Article 5 convention is. So I'd like to review quickly what that is. Um, and I want to show specifically that this isn't just a difference of opinion, where two people just have a different view of the way we should go about fixing our country. This is a blatant deception. Amy Galey joined I would call it a conspiracy, of Dennis Rydell and Steve Ross from Alamance County Republicans. And she joined in them with basically a sneak attack the Monday after Thanksgiving. They put this to the Rules Committee. An hour later, they dropped it to the floor and passed it for a vote. They knew they had lined up the votes. Basically, they waited for after the election. They had promised that this wasn't supposed to be on the short session for the Senate this year. We all breathed a sigh of relief that we had gotten through the session with this being left not passed. And then they sucker punched us, which is, they spend the whole election time talking about how we need to be teammates and work together. And then as soon as the election is over and they get what they want, they go and they secretly pass something that looks like a term limits resolution when it's really a call on Congress to open an Article 5 convention of the Constitution. Um, let's take a look, Keith. I know you have a slide there for Article 5. Before we go there, we'll look at this briefly. Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution. The very first words, right after the preamble, we start immediately with saying, all legislative power herein granted shall be vested in a Congress, right? States have basically have any rights or they have a set of rights that are not specifically enumerated in the Constitution and given to Congress, right? So for those things that are specifically enumerated in Article 1, Section 8, all legislative power is given to Congress. And those powers are herein granted. And what that means is it's about to list in Article 1, Section 8, the specific powers that Congress has. And if it's not on that list, they don't have that power. So it's the state representative's job to make sure that Congress is not overstepping its bounds. So rather than calling for an Article 5 convention of the Constitution, we need to get our state representatives to begin upholding the Constitution, the one that's already written. And they're not doing that, which is why we have the problems in America that we have. Go ahead and go to the next one, next slide. This is the actual text of Article 5. First, I'm going to talk about what this COS lobby group, which is very deceptively named, they call themselves the Convention of States because they want you to believe that the states in Article 5 here are given some special power to take back power from the federal government. But our federal form of government does not permit the states to do that. There are specifically enumerated powers in the Constitution that Congress has full authority on. Everything else is left to the states or to the people. And the reason they get away with it is because you'll see in here I've highlighted some of the words, but you'll notice the conventions and 3/4 thereof, or I'm sorry, your conventions and 3/4 of the several states is mentioned. That word conventions is plural. It is not a convention of the states. This COS lobby group calls themselves the Convention of States because they want you to believe states have this power that's just not there. They even have mock conventions in Williamsburg, Virginia, where they wine and dine and pay for your legislators to travel to Williamsburg, Virginia, for this gala. They bring in representatives from Hillsdale College who do all of the speaking for our representatives. If you look at our latest mock convention, Dennis Rydell is, by his own admission, he tells his private supporters on a video that he wakes up every day trying to figure out how to pass this. This is his baby. And he didn't say a word in that convention. He let the Hillsdale College representative for North Carolina just speak for him, because that's really the lobbyist that's behind all of this. It's ALEC, the Convention of States lobby, Mark Meckler, Rick Santorum, major, major money. Grassroots conservatives cannot just pull this trick on a Thanksgiving holiday and pass, a call to the Congress to call an Article 5 convention. This is globalist money at its finest. And our three representatives are completely bought and paid for by that globalist agenda. You'll notice here, this Article 5 says the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention. But notice the key word there is the Congress. Whenever this happens or this happens, shall call a convention, right? They want you to believe that Congress can call a convention or the states can call a convention. That's not true. States can apply as one of the two conditions for Congress to open a convention, but states do not get to run the convention. They do not get any say over how it's to be run, how the delegates are to be chosen, what is allowed to be proposed or even discussed in the meeting, or how how it will be ratified. And you'll notice the text goes on to say that it's that shall call a convention for proposing amendments. Notice it's plural, right? There's no inference here that the states get to dictate to Congress what the topic or agenda will be. It goes on to say, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by, and this is another or statement, right? The legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof. That term, conventions in 3/4 thereof, is a popular vote in each state. It is not the states calling a convention. That they want you to see something that is a mirage. It's not there. Okay, so no, notice what I have highlighted after that. It says as one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress. Notice the states have absolutely no say in which mode of ratification the Congress may choose. So, and it goes on to say, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year. Now, I'm not going to bother focusing on the last part of this, because what it's doing is it's listing a few limitations on what they're allowed to pass as amendments in Article 5 convention. What this means is Congress, the founders specifically wrote into this article what the limitations would be. And beyond that, there are no limitations. One of them expired here in 1808, right? And the other one has to do with equal suffrage in the Senate. We could debate whether or not that one has already been infringed upon, but the point here is there are no other limitations, and the states have no authority given to them in the Constitution to limit the agenda of an Article 5 convention.
Oh, and let me ask you this specifically: what North Carolina did was focus on term limits. So they're making this look like that we're going to have a very narrow. If this thing happens, we're going to have a very narrow few items that are brought up, such as term limits, and that's all that's going to be brought up. Is that? I mean, something similar to that. When you're saying this will open up the whole of the Constitution, is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm about to show you that this isn't just my opinion. They actually know it, and they're actually. I'm going to show you the deception here, the sleight of hand. It's an outright lie and deception, not
Okay.
a gentleman's disagreement on a topic where there are multiple opinions that are valid. This is a lie. This is a sham, and a globalist agenda to fundamentally change America. Go ahead to the next. Before I go on, I want to say a couple more things I want to say about that Article 5. Um, in 1973, they had the 34 states that they needed to call the convention. Congress began writing something called the Sunshine Act, I believe it was called, And they actually specifically said that the delegates to the convention would be chosen by popular vote conventions in the congressional districts. So they were going to have a popular vote in each congressional district, and that's how the delegates were to be chosen for the convention. The reason it didn't pass in the House was because states got realized what they had done and began rescinding applications. And we got it. We're basically down to about 21 at this point. We were 20. I think North Carolina just became 21, maybe 22. But that's why. So their side of it would say, "Oh, that's not law. That's okay. Well, it didn't become law because it didn't need to become law. The threat had disappeared once the states got wise to what was going on and began rescinding their applications, which is exactly what we need the voters of Alamance County to demand of our 3 representatives. And I mean demand or boot them out in their butts. They need to be voted out of office for this, and they need to pay a very high political price. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is the same COS lobby group. One of their darlings is a man named Representative Jody Arlington from, I'm sorry, Arrington, Jody Arrington from Texas. And he has been highly praised as being one of the COS's main supporters. And he has put in HCon Res 24 in the federal Congress. And I want you to read this carefully. Notice what it says. The same group that, oh, and by the way, the term limits resolution that they just passed on Monday is one of about 4 resolutions that they have in the NC House and Senate that they're trying to pass, calling for an Article 5 convention. What they do is they stick these red meat labels on each one of them, hoping to attract a different audience. So on one of them, it'll be a balanced budget amendment. On another one, it'll be, let's just open an Article 5 convention. That one doesn't go very far. There's another one, they'll do term limits. You'll notice on HJR 151 and on ncleg.gov, they only titled the resolution term limits. That's the only thing it says, just term limits. All right. So that way it would go completely unnoticed by the voters.
Sean, can I ask one thing? You're talking about we're talking about term limits. It only focuses on congressional, I mean, those term limits, those in the House and the Senate, correct?
Yeah,
What
of
about
course.
the
Dennis
local
is on what
legislatures? Tell me about that.
Yeah, Dennis is what I think in like 8th or 9th term in office, and he's writing, and he's not going to write himself into the term limits bill. He's going to write, here's what Congress should be term limited. We should continue to go on as long as we can. He's basically been a political darling in the Alamance County for long enough. Nobody's challenging him. That needs to come to an end. He needs to be term limited out. We have term limits, and I'm going to get to why the founding fathers didn't give us term limits. The truth is, we had them under the Articles of Confederation. And when we had our 1787 convention, one of the chief things they needed to fix in the Articles of Confederation was term limits. They needed to get rid of them. And I'm going to show you several quotes from our founding fathers where they describe the problems that term limits actually caused them. But before we go there, I want you to see HCon Res 24. It's a very brief resolution. That's the whole thing right there, pretty much the whole resolution. It's a very easy read. If your readers want to, or listeners want to Google this, they can see it for themselves. HCon Res 24, and we can put a link to it in the YouTube video. Notice it says calling an Article 5 convention for proposing a fiscal responsibility amendment. I mean, think about how broad that is. Anything that has to do with fiscal responsibility, right? It's a wide open topic. There's nothing limited about that. To the United States Constitution and stipulating ratification by a vote of we the people. Again, no states won't have any say in it. It's just a popular vote because they know how easy it is for them to use their media power to affect the popular vote, right? And then notice what they tacked on at the end of the sentence. And for other purposes. And for other purposes, right? Well, in other words, we know full well that we can't limit the agenda of an Article 5 convention, and we have no intention of doing so. All we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of the ignorance of the average Alamance County voter who won't know any better, and we're just going to slip it in. The only people that will complain will be people like Sean who know the difference, and he doesn't have that big enough of a microphone. We can get away with this, and in doing so, we can serve our own political aspirations. Make no mistake about it. Dennis, Amy, and Steve Ross each have their own political ambitions, and they put those political ambitions before your constitutional rights, which means they put those political ambitions before your life, your liberty, and your property. They will confiscate any one of those things and anything else they have to from you in order to further their political agenda. And this is a perfect example of them doing that. Notice the next thing that I basically the text below that I've highlighted, it says the same thing, but it gets even worse than that. Look at the last paragraph. It says, whereas congressional and state records of plenary applications for amendments on any subject and applications for a single subject of inflation fighting fiscal responsibility amendments compiled by the Article 5 Library counts Nevada's continuing application reported February 8th, 1979 in the congressional record as the 34th, thus achieving the two-thirds congressional mandate to call the convention for proposing amendments. Congressional records reported 39 applications by the end of 1979. So what he's saying is, what this resolution is saying is, look, guys, we don't need any new resolutions. And you know what? The topic that we put on the state resolution doesn't even matter. We can count any plenary application we want on any subject. They're saying it in their own words to the Congress, while they're telling the people, oh no, it's just a limited convention for term limits. They know darn right well that they are lying to the people. And they're counting on people like you and I not to say enough. It won't matter. They'll get away with anything that they can because the voters are more partisan than they are constitutional.
Okay, let me ask you this. So what is their ultimate goal then? What they want to do? They want to rewrite the Constitution. And we're going to look at some of those examples, at least one of those examples. Is that what you're saying? I mean, this is
Yeah, well,
the goal.
but Dennis, Amy, and Steve, they each have their own political ambitions, right? So Amy wants to be attorney general. Steve just wants to basically serve out one more term and have a cushy retirement on the state. Dennis, I don't know exactly what Dennis is getting out of this, but you can bet there's sort of fiscal rewards involved. It could be anything from, better vibration analysis, maritime contracts in his private business, or favors for his kids, or who knows? Who knows what he's gaining out of this? But one thing he's not gaining is your constitutional liberty, life, liberty, and property. It's being confiscated by the day because of actions like this by groups who can afford to do this while grassroots Republicans remain ignorant and keep buying the lie that we got to work as a team and just get behind the Republican or we're going to. The message every election is the same. You better get behind us because if you don't, the other guy's going to stick it to you even more than we will. Can you believe that? Right? I mean, these people will, there's no limit to how much these people will stick it to you. But don't worry, the other guy's worse, so you should vote for me. That's basically how this works.
Yeah.
Go look at the next slide. This is an example. So this is a Facebook post by the COS lobby. A person asks on a public Facebook page, you just happen to have a screenshot of it. They say, why not include an update to the Second Amendment in COS? Gun control advocates wear out the point that it was written when people only had muskets. So why not make it read the way we want it to read now? And listen to what they said. This is their response. They responded in writing publicly. It's called a clarification clause, and that's very much on the agenda of any number of study groups that are currently being conducted around the country, composed of COS project advocates and their state legislators, like Amy Galey, Dennis Rydell, and Steve Ross, among many others. Now we have Raybon who's leading the Senate. He's been a big COS advocate. Phil Berger did a decent job of keeping it at bay, and now we have Raybon, and here it goes right on through because they buy their pawns. I'm going to show you some more examples of that, but this
Yeah.
shows you quite honestly their intention to change more than just term limits. They want to change. They want actually want to change the Second Amendment. They want to clarify it. Anybody who understands the Second Amendment and the rest of their Constitution knows that any changes you make to it are only going to water it down
Yeah.
and wear away your rights even more.
Yeah.
Take a look at the next
Well,
page.
let me say this before we move. I
Yeah,
think that is going to be a big factor in communicating this to people to show them their goal is to take away your rights, and this is just one of the ways that
their goal is to
they'll seek to
serve their
accomplish it.
political agenda and their political ambition. Whatever it is you have to lose in the process is of no consequence to them. None. They'll pretend, they'll smile. Every time Jenna sees me now, when I brought this topic up to the Alamance GOP, I sent an email out to the Women's Republican Club, and he accused me of attacking his wife. He's been jeering at me ever since. I think part of it, of course, when nobody else is looking, he acts like a gentleman one way, and then he acts like that behind my back, I'm sorry, behind everybody else's back. But the thing is, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. The But yeah, these people, they're following their own political ambitions, and whatever you have to lose in the compromise is well worth it to them.
Yeah, and I remember, and I had a conversation with him at the GOP meeting as well, and he had told me, I asked him, I said, Dennis, why are y'all doing this? What is the purpose? And he basically came to the end result of saying, well, we've got to do something. But is
Yeah.
really opening up the Constitution to this generation? I mean, do you really believe the people who are involved in politics today are more able to write something better than our forefathers did or our founding fathers did? I just think that is a dangerous precedent. In fact, I remember Glenn Beck saying, me and you
Wait,
had talked about that.
that's right. We are not the generation.
Yeah,
Our Supreme Court Justice Anthony Scalia. They like to quote him early in his career, where he was a supporter of this. Later in his career, is like, "Whoa, I'm definitely not a supporter now." Who knows what would happen?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We
Okay.
don't have the statesman, and the fact that they would do this sort of thing shows that even if they were the statesman, we can't trust them
No.
because they're deliberately being deceptive. What happens once you find out that somebody is a deceiver? Do you want to continue voting for them to uphold your constitutional rights and your life and your liberty and your property? No. You do that, you will lose it. And in fact, you often lose more of your rights through your political darlings than you do through your political enemies.
Yeah.
It waves. Sometimes the Democrats are defending your rights better than the Republicans.
Yeah.
The rhetoric doesn't make you think so, but it does work that way.
This is serious. I mean, this is very serious. If you watch this video, you really, and we'll be talking more about this, but this is really the foundational, the hinge pin of our country. You change the Constitution, you radically change everything else. And I just, like we said, I just don't think this generation is the generation. I don't trust hardly any politician, hardly anyone in government, and I would not trust them to rewrite or any portion of this Constitution.
I often say, don't amend it, respect it. And they're
Yeah,
not respecting it. The Real ID Act is coming in May. We push that back. The states push that back through the work of the John Birch Society. We press on those issues at a national level, working locally in districts. And by the way, I invite others who are concerned about these issues and want to work with people who are not partisan, but are focused and strategic in how we go about fighting these issues. We have another issue is the Real ID Act. We have successfully pushed that back and pushed that back and pushed that back. And now it's about to be implemented in May. We have so many other fires going on, nobody's paying any attention to it.
yeah,
Soon, think about this. While they're promising that you have to show voter ID, and everybody's yay for the Republicans, they finally passed voter ID, yay. The state representatives are funding the Real ID Act, which gives the federal government the ability to issue your ID, right? You see the shell game that goes on,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
They make these moves and then they advertise the good things they've done, and then the back door they're just sticking it right to you, and that's
Sean, would that have
the way it
anything to
works.
do with election integrity at some point or no?
Well, everybody's clamoring for election integrity. It sounds wonderful. Who would fight election integrity, right? But if you're also supporting efforts that are undermining the election integrity,
And
it's
that,
like abortion, right?
yeah,
We have all these yay for abortion. Amy Gailey gets up in front of the GOP committee and talks about you did that. Whoa, boy, yay for us. There's now more abortion happening than any time in world history. All they could do is pop a pill. Isn't it interesting that as soon as the pill can be sent all over the country and women can take them privately, that all of a sudden the Republicans make a breakthrough and now abortion's illegal, right?
yeah,
No, it's not illegal. They just get all the credit, right? They get the credit, they get the headline, they get the camera shot, and you get screwed. That's the way it works. If you're
okay,
dealing with dishonest people who are after their own political ambitions instead of your freedom.
yeah, that's key, so
Yeah,
key.
let's take a look at the next slide. Oh, by the way, Mike Johnson, big convention, and I hate using the term convention of states because there's no such thing. It is the lie, right? So the more I say it, the more I perpetuate the lie. It's like saying we're a democracy, right? The more you hear that, the more you think it's true.
Hmm.
Of course, it's not true. But I just want to point out that while they're pushing this in the Congress, your new Speaker of the House is very pro convention of states, so are very pro changing the Constitution. Um, so yeah, go to the next slide. I think this is the well, here's Rick Santorum. He's one of the big lobby groups. Rick Santorum's got a lifetime constitutional voting record of about 60%. He violated the Constitution with like 4 out of every 10 of his votes, and those votes were big violations. So it doesn't really matter that the 6 votes were good, or the bad votes just completely wipe out any
Yeah.
freedom you might have. You notice he's in 1 year. I checked out his tax returns. $333,000 just to Rick Santorum in lobby fees to pass this. Mark Meckler, $580,000 between him and his wife, just in salary. That what they do is they get up on stage and they tell everybody, "Oh, this is grassroots grannies scraping together their nickels and then praying to God that they can find a few more nickels in their seat cushions to help save their country." Right? Grassroots grannies cannot make this happen. This is globalists making this happen. Yeah. So if you go to the next slide, okay, there you go. Thank you. This is the conservative constitution, and I believe this is section Article 1, Section 12, about the 7th paragraph or so.
Mhm.
You'll notice it says, you were there. There we go. Neither the states nor the United States, uh, yeah, I think it's supposed to say states, shall make or enforce any law infringing the right to keep and bear arms of the sort ordinarily used for self defense or recreational purposes, provided that the states and the United States, in places subject to its general regulatory authority, may enact and enforce reasonable regulations on the bearing of arms and the keeping of arms by persons determined with due process to be dangerous to themselves or to others. So this is how they want to improve the Second Amendment. What do you think? You're going to be left with any Second Amendment rights after if this goes into effect?
It says enforce reasonable regulations as compared to shall not be infringed, in that sense.
Well, and it specifically says that our only rights are to keep and bear arms of the sort ordinarily used for self-defense or recreational purposes. Who gets to decide that?
Yeah.
You see how they just completely blow it up. Another fallacy is, well, what if we pass a balanced budget amendment? Newsflash: it is already the state legislators' job to balance the budget, right? Or it's the congressional's job to balance the budget. It's the state representative's job to make sure that if they're doling out money to mandate things that they don't have the right to mandate, the state is supposed to go, no. It's called nullification, Article 6, right? They
Right.
can make any law they want to that is in pursuance thereof of this Constitution. If it's not in pursuance of this Constitution and the rights given to them in Article 1, Section 8, they have no authority, and the states are supposed to say no. But they're
Yeah.
not saying no. What they're saying is, yes, please, feed my political ambitions, and I'll give you anything you want.
And political and also monetary. I mean, look at Rick Santorum. That was pretty. It's a lot of money. I mean, for this,
For
some
one
people are selling
lobbyist.
their souls. They're selling. They're not, as John F. Kennedy Jr. said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you could do for your country." They're not asking that anymore.
Yeah.
They're
Well, and
wanting to
that's
know what the country and others can do for them.
right. I mean, and by the way, that's one lobbyist through one of their PAC organizations. They have plenty of other PAC organizations. Hillsdale College is completely compromised at this point. They used to be totally against it until Mark Meckler started giving them a bunch of constitutional wall art and expensive, art and that sort of thing. Now, then they became very quiet on it. Now they're much more quiet. I just realized I got to plug in my. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
I'm getting warnings that I'm running out of battery here.
Well, and I guess if you're a Second Amendment believer, this should really trouble you, and you should really go to our elected officials and say, you're not going to be able to contain this convention just for the simplicity of term limits. This is on the table. Am I right, Sean?
Well, so sorry about this. Yeah, so what they're going to say, they're gonna say stuff like, well, we already know that they're not really going to call the convention. We just want to scare them so that they'll pass term limits. I want you to see the lie. I want you to see these people as the deceivers and liars that they are. If all we had was a difference of opinion, no big deal. I'll be a gentleman about it, right? But these people are deceiving you. You saw HCon Res 24. You saw their specific intention of asking for a convention with the resolutions that have already been passed. There are 5 resolutions that have been passed in North Carolina from 1909 through today, through Monday, last Monday. Um, any one of them could be used according to HCon Res 24. The only reason they continue passing new ones in states where they've already got them is to make the claim that this is a grassroots, growing, popular movement. The way they tricked everybody in passing it through the Senate on the Monday after election or after Thanksgiving, they passed it in the same way through the House. Dennis got this squeezed through the Judiciary 3 um, last year, and it languished and sat there. It's not a popular resolution by any stretch of the imagination. I even have people who are sponsors of the bill who are telling me privately, "Yeah, I didn't want to spoil us. I don't want to do this. I don't want anything to do with this thing." But what they do is they primary you hard if you're not a supporter of theirs, and they give you a lot of political money. What they'll do is they'll run mailers in your district talking about how wonderful you are, and they never have to show it in a political contribution statement. So the campaign didn't spend the money, so it doesn't show up in their campaign reports. And you're getting all this great press, and everybody thinks you're a jolly good fellow because COS is painting you that way. And all the conservatives that don't know any better, they're basically they're like, I call them political groupies. The only reason they're following it is because people that they respect. He taught my ninth grade math class or whatever, and it's like, so it must be a good guy. Anything he says is good. I'm for. We got to we've got to educate our electorate better than this.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And Sean, you're exactly right. We educating people. And listen, I will stand with someone, but when they're wrong, they're wrong. I mean,
Uh,
and you don't see that happening. You see them
and when
just
they're
continuing to
deceitful
follow them.
and ambitious and willing to sell you out deliberately like this is deliberate. Again, don't make the mistake of thinking that we're dealing with a nice person who just happens to agree with Sean. You don't see me on podcasts or making a big deal about somebody who just happens to disagree with me on something. I don't act like that. But with this kind of deception, this needs to be called out. And for the next 2 years, we need to make sure we impact the popularity of Steve Ross, Dennis Rydell, and Amy Gailey. They need to be exposed, and they need to suffer in the amount of votes that they receive the next election. And my hope is somebody watching this video that has been thinking about running or primarying these candidates will contact me. They're going to get a lot of support from me and from others to run a primary election against these 3 candidates. We're going to make sure we're going to be taking steps to make sure that they start paying a political price for this.
Yeah, and I was looking at some of the voting numbers. It doesn't look like they're winning by maybe I think
That well,
6 or 7,000 votes. Was that right?
the margins are definitely shrinking, and if you
Yeah.
think about why, you think about like the United Nations is pumping immigrants into our county. Where are our state representatives saying no? They're not. They're just, and it doesn't. They're just whatever they can get, favors they can get from these globalists, they'll take, and they'll leave you with the bill, and they'll do whatever they can to make it look like it's somebody else's fault.
Yeah,
But
and
it's,
you live in Alamance County, you need to make sure that you are up to date on these things, and you let your representative know these issues. I mean, they have got to be addressed. I mean, I agree with you 100%, Sean.
we
Great.
need immediate rescission. We need
Yeah.
them to actually say, Dennis, Amy, Steve, I demand that you submit a rescission resolution, rescinding all previous resolutions calling on North Carolina to putting North Carolina on the list for our Article 5 convention.
Okay.
This is not something that Alamance County would support, which is
Yeah.
why this is why they spent two sessions not talking about it. When it did come up in the district, it was very unpopular, so they stopped talking about it, and then they quietly passed it with a deceptive title so that nobody would know that they had done it.
Yeah, and at the end of the video, I'm going to give Sean the opportunity to tell you how to contact him if you want to be a part of the chapter or things like that. And so I'll give you a chance to talk like that. You want to go ahead and go to the fathers? I mean, some of these
Yeah, yeah, please. Now, one of the things that people need to understand too about term limits, I know they're very popular, but most people are not aware of our history. We had term limits under the Articles of Confederation. I'm going to show you a few quotes from our founding fathers. This one is from Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 72. He says, "Nothing appears more plausible at first sight, nor ill founded upon close inspection, than term limits." And by the way, then term limits is implied because of the context of the
Mhm.
Federalist paper that he's talking in. He says, "One ill effect of the exclusion would be a diminution of the inducements to good behavior, rather than when we were permitted to entertain a hope of obtaining by merit a continuance of them." So, in other words, if I do a good job, you're going to want to vote for me again. If I do a bad job, you're going to not vote for me, right? That was true in a day and an age when the voters had a morality to them. They had a constitutional education and the integrity to stand up for their own constitutional rights and the rights of others. Now we have politically ambitious people representing us. Politically ambitious people do not rise up from a wholesome, moral people. Moral people don't elect those kinds of representatives. The first and foremost problem that we have in this district is the integrity of the electorate. The electorate has got to give up this good old boy. I went to high school with him. I've known him for years. At least they're not a Democrat. We got to give up all that and start not educating ourselves on how the Constitution really works and why it is the only form of government that can work. The constitutional republic is the only form of government that is not constantly at war with the rights of mankind. And we need to uphold it.
Good point.
Let me show you the next slide. Another example. This is not Governor Morris, but a man named Gouverneur Morris, one of our founding fathers. Madison notes the Constitutional Convention of 1787. He said term limits tended to destroy the great motive to good behavior. The hope of being rewarded by a reappointment, it was saying to him, make hay while the sun shines. While he was in office, he needed to do a good job so that when his reelection came up, get reelected. Um, by the way, this resolution was passed on Monday by a lame duck Senate. And it's very important to understand that if you impose term limits, you end up with more lame ducks.
Mhm.
And the lame ducks that are leaving office, even if they were really good at their job and they get fired anyway, guess what that makes them dependent on? It makes them dependent on the political apparatus. They now have to endear themselves to the party structure so that they can land in the next good job, right? An ambassadorship, right? A county commissioner seat or whatever, a senator, a congressman. They're fired. It doesn't matter whether they did a good job or not. Guess what happens when they're leaving office? They do things that can obtain that favor, like passing a globalist agenda to change the Constitution of the United States. And that's what's really going on here. Is they knew they had the votes because they had enough people leaving office that wouldn't end up having to pay a political price. And by the way, if you do us this favor, you'll be surprised what good things you can land after you're out of the Senate, right? That's how lame duck sessions work. And term limits increases the number of lame ducks. Let's go to the next slide.
That was a good point. That was a good explanation.
Thanks. Here's nothing appears more. This is Alexander Hamilton. Nothing appears more plausible. I'm sorry. This is a repeat. I already
I
did this one.
apologize. Okay,
What's
let's
up?
try. Is this one?
Yeah. Here's John Adams. The people should be at liberty to choose the ablest and best men. Yet, upon the present term limits supposition, the people voluntarily resign this right and shackle their own choice. Would you want to term limit out a John Adams? If you finally got a John Adams in office, would you want him to be fired because Dennis says so?
Mm-mm.
No, right? So think about this. Our problem is we keep electing these self serving politicians. If you force them out of office after a couple of terms, how does that improve the people's selection process? Are they suddenly going to pick a better representative?
Mm-mm.
No, they're gonna do just the same sloppy bad job that they did with the first guy. Right? Um, Term limits doesn't fix that problem. The real problem is the education of the electorate and the integrity of the electorate. It isn't until we educate and activate the electorate that we fix the problem that people are trying to fix with term limits. And
Yeah.
notice he's speaking in the present tense. What he's saying is, under the present system, the one that we need to get rid of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they had an Article 5. That's why they had what's called the Constitutional Convention of 1787. The promise when they went into that convention was that all 13 states were going to have, first of all, they were only supposed to fix problems under the Articles of Confederation. They were not supposed to rewrite the entire form of government like they did.
Mm-hmm.
They were also supposed to get ratification from all 13 of the states. If they didn't get 100%, no go. But if you look at Article 7 of our current Constitution, it
Yeah.
says the ratification of 9 states shall be sufficient to ratify this Constitution. It's like a one sentence article, easy to
Mm-hmm.
read. Just go to Article 7 and look at our article. What they did, they didn't just rewrite the entire form of government, they actually changed the rules upon which that new government would be ratified.
Yeah.
And delegates to this new convention that Dennis and Amy and Steve are trying to start, they will be just as free to change the form of government and the rules of ratification.
Yeah.
Next slide. I'm gonna end with this. I could go on and on and on. There's lots more to discuss, but this is Thomas Jefferson, and what he's saying is educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the, and I should underline this, they are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. I want you to focus on that for a moment. Underline the word only. Jefferson is literally saying to you, there is no other plan to save America. And that's what makes the John Birch Society unique. We focus on the only plan to save America. There is no second best. And the reason for that is because everything you do to try to save America outside of this plan will fail because it will require. I always ask this question: whatever plan you have to save America, does it require an informed and moral electorate? And the answer is always yes. If you had an informed and moral electorate, would you need your plan? No.
You wouldn't.
Therefore, the law of hypothetical syllogism brings us around to this is the only way to save America. Put on your overalls, all right? Roll up your sleeves and get to the only work that can save America. If you're busy in the partisan political structure, just trying to get another Republican voted into office, you are wasting your resources by not doing what this slide calls you to do. And you will end up sliding further and further into chaos. You have a choice. Would you with other you can go 60 miles an hour off a cliff with a Democrat or 45 miles an hour off a cliff with a Republican. And if your answer to that is, well, I guess I'll pick the Republican because at least it's slower, you're the reason we're all losing our rights. And we're not going to get them back that easily. This is the answer to saving our country, and only this.
Yeah. So, Sean, with that being said, how do people get involved in this? Hearing what they've heard about how there are a group of people trying to change the Constitution, how can they get in touch with you and learn a little bit more about this local chapter of the John Birch Society?
Yeah, well, they're welcome to reach out to me. I have a JBS underscore Burlington at hotmail.com. I made that's just an email address I use for my JBS work. So anybody's welcome to just reach out to me there. You can post a comment here. I'll see it eventually. Reach out to you. That's probably the best way. JBS underscore Burlington at hotmail.com. And just ask yourself this question, am I really ready to work with local people to stop being the partisan politician that's gotten us into this mess and start being the conscientious citizen that is going to hold any representative accountable, Democrat or Republican, the moment they violate the Constitution?
Yeah.
Am I prepared to turn this into a district that honors the Constitution? Am I prepared to turn this into a district where a person who violates the Constitution cannot hold public office in this district? Because, and if you're not firmly committed to that goal, stick to whatever game you're playing right now. It doesn't. We don't waste our time, really. We really need those people. And that's just, those are always the people that save the country, and
Yeah.
that's who we need. So if you're that person, we definitely want to meet with you. If you're on the sidelines, we have people. I have about I have a number of periphery members, people who have not like joined us officially. In fact, I think you're one. I think about it. You're kind of out in the outer sphere. You're not a member, um, but you are doing what you can. You're on the journey to you're solving the country's problems in the way that you feel you need to do, and I appreciate that. I applaud that. I don't know that you've quite gotten to the point. Maybe you have, where that's that last slide is your heart and soul is all about informing the electorate, and maybe that's what you've chosen to do with this podcast. And I hope that it achieves that. I just want to caution you: don't anything that distracts you from that one goal is truly a distraction. Stick to that one goal, and keep working with us as much as you can. And the more you work with us, then the more we can accomplish to truly transform this district into a constitutional
Well, and
district.
one thing I'd like for us to do is to get together and once again and look at the voting records of our certain elected officials and to see how consistently they're voting with the Constitution. I think a lot of people, once they see those numbers, will be probably quite surprised because I think aren't they sworn to uphold the Constitution or don't they take an oath? I mean, I think
Before
they do.
God, so help me
Yeah,
God.
yeah. I mean,
He
yeah.
takes
So
those
you would
oaths very
hope they
seriously.
would. Yeah, I think that would open up a lot of eyes. And if this that we had on the what was that called? The constitutional conservative?
The
Is that what that
conservative Constitution, yeah.
conservative constitution, talking about the Second Amendment, that is it's troubling. But anyway, I'll leave that there and let you have the closing words as far as contacting you, which you have done, and encouraging others, me and others, to really see that this is as you say to me, the Constitution is the solution. Isn't that
Yeah,
what you?
absolutely.
Yeah,
We do a 6 week Constitution is a Solution workshop. We'd love to have any of your listeners join us for that. It's fun. Everybody that watches it loves it. Democrats and Republicans. It's educational. It's fun. It's good fellowship time. It's 1 hour once a week with some local people that are interested in watching it as well. I narrate it, and then we go through and we learn our Constitution, and it's refreshing to be like, oh, all this years I didn't really realize that. And
yeah.
then by the end of the 6 weeks, you generally have a camaraderie with those people who have attended, and you'll want to work with them. And then some of those people will want to join the chapter and do more focused, just strategic work. And then others will just be like, "Hey, thanks. I really appreciate what you're doing. Don't really have time to join your chapter, but Godspeed to you." So that's something I would love to have people join us for.
Yeah. Well,
Definitely.
it it puts you in with like-minded people, and it
Yeah.
does build and encourage, it builds this team mentality of working together for the purpose of which you've laid out tonight.
Yeah, another thing. So you had mentioned looking at their voting record. We do publish something called the Freedom Index, and that shows all of your state representatives and all of your federal members. You can go to freedomindex.org, or just Google the Freedom Index John Birch Society. And we hand those out for free like candy. We want as many of our electorate to be watching that, and then to actively call up their district or speak to them at a GOP committee meeting or wherever they happen to meet them in the community, and say, "Can you explain to me why you felt comfortable violating the Constitution in this way?" There's usually a number of things that they violated. And we focus about 5 issues every quarter, where everybody across the country, all the John Birch Society chapters, are following the same 5 pillar issues. So there's a groundswell. And what you'll notice is when you see an article in the New American, it's only a couple months away from being on Sean Hannity and
It's
all the
true.
conservative news. A lot of them the John Birch Society has been accused of radicalizing the right. We have been called conspiracy theorists for since 1958, and we have been. One thing I'm so proud of with the John Birch Society is I have tons of literature that I can give you from all throughout that time, and we've never had to revise any of the things that we said. We don't go after the crazy wacko stuff, but some of the stuff can sound pretty deep, and it is. But we document it very well, and we prove it very well. And there are very few people laughing at us now
Yeah.
for our conspiracy theories. Everyone's like, "No, they're true. We get it." So we everything we've said has been dead on since 1958.
Well, part of part of that was to marginalize the John
Yeah,
Birch
absolutely,
Society, to
they
make you
needed to
look
do
like
that.
you're a nut,
That's right.
you're a conspiracy theorist, you don't know what you're
Yes,
talking about. And if we've seen anything within the last 4 or 5, 6 years, we
sure.
see that the government, I mean, if you want to talk about
And the
trustworthy,
media, yeah,
yeah, yeah, you
and
can't
the media.
trust. Yeah,
And then the last thing I think I would close with is, um, if you start rowing in the direction of the Constitution locally, starts it's like finding religion, really. As soon as everybody can talk about be a nice person, right? But as soon as you're a sincere and you take your faith seriously, you begin speaking of it. I was kicked out of my house because I started going to church 3 times a week, and started hanging out with Christian friends, and only dated Christian girls, and and then did like Friday, Saturday night socials with Christian groups, and I really threw myself in a sincere way, and that was intolerable to my family. Um, you know, the same thing with the Constitution. Start talking seriously to your representatives about the Constitution in a very sincere way, and watch which ones embrace you and call you out and praise you for what you're doing, right? Publicly, not just privately, but publicly. And then pay attention to which ones marginalize you and distance themselves from you. And you will find that it's almost unanimously distancing from you and marginalizing you. The reason for that is because true constitutional integrity does not serve people's political ambitions very well. The
yeah,
globalists are the ones in control of where you go in politics, not the voters. We need to change that so that the voters are more in control of that. But the moral and upright ones are more in control of that. And
yeah.
the churches are doing a terrible job of pulling that off. And we need to work on that as well.
Agreed. Well, agreed. Well, Sean, I appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to discuss these issues.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to close this. Thank you if you've joined this broadcast. You can contact me at Alamance County Talks Politics at gmail.com if you're interested in any more information concerning this. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. And until next time, take care.